Hey guys, it is the 1-year birthday of the Trailblazer Talks podcast, and I am so excited for this episode. Thank you guys for everyone who's been listening for the past year. Thank you for taking a chance on this podcast and tuning in, and thank you to all the amazing guests who also took a risk of coming on the show and being a part of the first year of my podcast. It is crazy to think that this podcast has been out there for a whole year now, and it got off to kind of a crazy start last year when we first started. I started strong and 2020 hit and we launched the first 7 episodes last summer. And then I took a pretty long break after that just to regroup, and a lot of different things in life happened. And so we took kind of like a 7-month break. And then we came back this February with episodes with guests, and we're able to keep the podcast going all the way until now through season 2, where we're at this current moment. But I'm so excited about everything that we've been able to accomplish and the conversations that we've been able to bring you over this past year. I know that the conversations have really helped me, and I hope that they've really helped you as well. And one of my biggest goals with the podcast was just to bring you conversations with people who are blazing trails right where they are, to encourage you and inspire you in your own God-given journey with whatever purpose that God has called you to. So I hope that the episodes have been encouraging you. I hope they've been meeting you right where you are in the season that you're in. And if nothing else, inspiring you that you can do it too, that you can do whatever it is that God has called you to do. And looking back over the different guests we've had and just the different ways that we were able to get the episodes out this year has just been really encouraging and inspiring, and I'm just so grateful for each and every guest that we had on the show. So if you're one of the guests and you're listening to this, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your schedule. Thank you for your words of wisdom in each episode. And this season's not over, guys. We still have a few more episodes left for season 2 before we take a little break to prepare for season 3. So make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure that you are tuned in and have whatever notifications on for podcasts that you have, just to make sure that you can get each episode as they come out each week. So I'm excited for that. We have 3 more guest episodes and 1 more solo episode for this season. So stay tuned for that. The rest of the guests are amazing, and they're going to bring so much wisdom to your life and encouragement. So make sure you tune in each week. But I wanted to talk a little bit about just some vision and kind of what's coming up for the podcast, since it's a 1-year anniversary or birthday, whatever you want to call it, and just talk about dreaming with God. Because that's a question that I get a lot from people is, that's so cool you started a podcast. That's so cool that you have a blog, or that's so cool that you do XYZ. And I always get asked how I did it, or how did I know when the right timing was, or, I have all these God dreams, but they're just kind of sitting on a shelf and stuff like that. So I want to talk a little bit first about kind of vision of what's coming up for the podcast in future seasons, and then talk about how you can dream with God as well and make progress in the things that you feel called to in your own life. So let's hop on in. So as far as vision for what's coming up for the podcast, for season 3, I'm going to be opening up a form on my website eventually. I'll let you guys know when it's available, but I really want to hear your guys' stories. I want to hear how you got to where you are. I want to hear how you made it from where you started to where you are now, and how you discovered your own God-given purpose and the advice that you have for others. And that's kind of what we've already been doing, but I would love to get more people from our community on the show. If you have a story to tell and you can encourage others, I would love to have you on the show. So stay tuned for that. I'll let you guys know when the form is available and when that's all ready to go before season 3, because I'll make sure that I ask specific questions so that I can make sure whoever's on the show has the right format for what to bring and filter that through that lens. And also coming up for future episodes and the future seasons, I really want to focus on equipping you guys. And I've already kind of been doing that, but that's just some vision for you guys of where the show's headed, is making sure that we're doing a really good job of telling inspiring stories of where someone started to where they are now and how they're being a trailblazer right where they are. Because I don't know about you, but I love hearing people's stories of where they started and how they got to where they're going. I'm always inspired by that with different TV shows I watch and with different podcasts that I listen to. So I hope that that's inspiring to you. And then I want to make sure I'm actually equipping equipping you guys and giving you takeaways so that you can actually go out and blaze your own trail. So if that sounds like something that sounds good to you, make sure that you're subscribed and make sure that you leave a review if the podcast has been helpful for you, because whenever you leave a review, it's really helpful because other people can then learn about the show. They can find out if the show's any good, if it's worth their time. So if you have found this season valuable, I would love for you to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts where reviews are available. I think it's mostly on Apple, but I think other platforms might have it as well. So now let's talk about dreaming with God, because I know that this is a big topic that I get asked about a lot. And I want to make sure that you guys feel equipped in your own journeys and your own dreams, and that you feel confident in pursuing the things that God is maybe planting in your heart or encouraging you to do so that you can walk out in obedience. For me, what that's looked like is a lot of times when I'm dreaming with God, I am spending time with God, making sure that I am in alignment with Him. I spend time in prayer. Sometimes I do a fast or something like that to make sure that I'm in alignment with whatever it is that I feel that God has called me to. So sometimes that looks like taking a Saturday or a Sunday or something like that where I have intentional time with God. And then I also like to do what I call a dream dump. So I have a journal that I like to call my dream journal. And what I'll do is get the piece of paper and I'll just write out everything that I'm dreaming of that I feel like it'd be really cool for me to do, or that I feel like I'd be good at or gifted in or feel like I could help others with. And I just kind of write it all on paper. Whether I think God's called me to it or not, I just dump it all out on paper, kind of like a brain dump. And that's always helpful for me because then I have it all on paper and it's not just jumbling around in my head. And then once I have that all on paper, then I like to pray through that list and pray with God and just kind of do a symbolism of surrender with God. I like to lay it all out and say, God, here are all the things that I desire. Help me to know what are the things that you desire and the things that you have planned for my life. I give you full permission to remove or take any of these away and to add to this list. And listen for God to speak that in you and through you. And it's not going to be necessarily like an audible voice. You'll just know in your spirit, or maybe it's through other people that He confirms it. However God speaks to you, you'll feel that confirmation. And it may not be in that instance. It may not be right in the moment of when you're writing all of this down. It could be days later. It could be weeks later. But take time to process that with God and make sure that you are surrendered to Him and that you're in alignment with Him. Just like at work, we have these alignment calls where we want to make sure that our team is all on the same page and that we are all pursuing the same mission. We need to do that with God. And if you're married, you need to do that with your spouse as well and your family. So for me, it's a little different because I'm single. And so I'm just processing this with God and with my mentors and people like that who speak wisdom into my life. But if you're married, I would definitely recommend having like a dream date or dream journal session with your spouse and making sure that you guys are in alignment with each other as well as with God, because it's really important to make sure we are aligned. And so I recommend doing that. And when you're praying, making sure that God is first, making sure that you're allowing room for the Holy Spirit to speak to you and that you're not trying to predict what God will say. If you're listening to God only for Him to answer you in a certain way, which I'm guilty of, then you're going to miss whatever He's saying. If you're hoping He's just going to give you a yes and that's all you're listening for, then if He says not yet, or maybe this is not the right fit, you might miss that. So definitely make sure that you go through that process of saying, God, I surrender all of this to you. I trust you. I know that you have good and perfect plans for my life, and I want to be in alignment with you. I want to be Spirit-led, and I want to do whatever you have for my life, because ultimately we have to trust that God knows what's best for our life. He knows which seasons that we need to do certain things in, and there are certain seasons where we won't be able to do as much as we could in other seasons. If you're a mom right now, that season may look a little different. Your time may look a little more stretched. Or if you're a CEO at the moment, your time may look different because you have more responsibility. Or Or if you're like me and you're single, you may have a little bit more time on your hands, but you may be, struggling with other dreams of and desires of wanting to be married, and that being something that weighs heavy on your heart. Or maybe you have more commitments right now than you're able to commit to other parts of your life, and that's totally okay. God understands and He knows the commitments you currently have, and whatever He's going to ask you to do isn't necessarily going to conflict with that. God's really good at complementing the seasons of our life and working within the seasons that we have. So I would just recommend making sure that you ask God what is meant for this season. And then once you kind of process that with God and write everything down, then I recommend making another list of asking God, okay, what dreams do you have for me in this current season? What tasks or what things do you want me to focus on right now in this season? And make another list of writing that down and seeing what vision He gives you for this season. Ask Him for vision, ask Him for blessing and favor, and don't be afraid of that. I would just make sure that you are writing it all down, because sometimes things circle back around. You never know when a God dream will circle back around. And that's the really cool part that I love in life, is looking back at my journals and seeing where God answered prayers or redirected or circled things back that maybe I thought had died. Sometimes we have dreams and it seems like they die or they go away for a season, but God brings them back in other seasons. So don't be discouraged if the answer is not yet. Just make sure you write it all down, put dates next to it, and then keep praying. And once you have vision for the season that you're in and you feel like you know that God has spoken something to you or revealed something to you, then take one small step towards whatever that is, because dreams are nothing without action. So we have to be able to take action on our dreams. So if you feel like your next right step right now is to start a blog or something like that, and maybe you don't have the finances at the moment to pay for a website or whatever, then I recommend starting writing in a journal. Write in a journal and then look for guest opportunities on other people's blogs or platforms to be able to be a guest writer for a season. And then as you grow your platform, save your money and be able to start a blog later. Or if you are having a dream to start a podcast, then look for free ways to get started. That's what I did. I used Anchor, which is a free platform for podcasting, and it costs no money. I already had editing software on my computer, and most computers have a free version of some type of editing software. I happen to have the Adobe suite already on my computer that I pay for, so I use Adobe Audition to edit my podcast. But there's so much you can learn on YouTube, and if there's a season where maybe you can't start the thing yet, you can definitely learn. So there's seasons where I haven't been able to launch certain things that I'm dreaming of launching, but I'm pivoting, and instead I'm going to take time to really hone in on my craft and hone in on the things that I'm wanting to eventually launch and learn from those, and learn on all the YouTube videos and Skillshare things and stuff like that, so that eventually I can take the action to actually do the thing. And right now I'm just learning as much as I can about that until the right season comes where I can actually do the things that I'm dreaming of doing. And then be open to God making pivots. Sometimes we have these different dreams and it seems like it's going to roll out one way and seems like it's all going to fall into place in this certain way that we dreamed of, but then God makes a pivot or life happens and we have to rethink how that dream's going to come to fruition. I was listening to a podcast just this past week about a girl, and she wanted to have kids and wasn't able to in a season, but she was able to mother people in other ways during that season. And she was able to still use those skills of mothering to mentor others and to invite families into her home as a space where they can grow and learn. And she was able to have that dream come true in a different way in that season. And it doesn't mean that God won't ever answer that prayer. It just means sometimes in the current season we're in, we have to pivot and make the most of where God has us. So whatever the dream is that you have, whatever it is that you are wanting to do, I would just encourage you to keep pressing in, keep praying through it, and write it all down. And I love in Habakkuk where it says, write down the vision and make it plain. And I think that that's super important because we have to be able to look back and see God's faithfulness. And you never know when you might want a record of kind of the history of how the things play out in in your life with the different God dreams. I know for me, it's been really neat to look back over, like I mentioned earlier, to look back over my journals and just see the prayers that God has answered, to see how God made things happen that I never thought could happen, and just the opportunities and doors that he opened along the way that I look back and I'm like, wow, God is so faithful. And that's important too, because there's going to come times when you're dreaming and living out your purpose with God and living out your calling where you get discouraged or you get deflated or you feel like, why did you call me to this if it's not going to work out right now? Or why do I have this desire if I'm not going to be able to do it in this anytime soon? And instead of looking back and being like, it's taken so long for this to happen, you can look back and see all the moments of faithfulness and all the ways that God has brought you to where you are today. And for me, I've looked back over my career over the last 7 years, and I can see God's hand all over it. And it's super encouraging when I do that, because instead of letting the enemy get to me and make me question God, it helps me remember God's faithfulness and like, no, God always has a plan. He always has good for our lives, even if it's not playing out exactly how I thought it would. There's never been a moment where I've looked back over my life and thought, man, that was not at all the right thing. Anytime God's done something in my life, I'm like, wow, that's actually better than I could have imagined. Or wow, like you knew better, God. Of course he knows better. But you can look back and see his faithfulness and be encouraged by that and know that he's going to show up right where you are. And one last thing I'll leave you with is just this little encouragement, because it's something that's been encouraging me lately in my own waiting seasons for different things I've been praying for. But last week I went on a trip to Ellijay, Georgia, to a cabin with my family, and we got to go tour a vineyard of a family friend. And none of us drink, so it was kind of funny that we toured a vineyard, but we just got to go tour our friend's vineyard and see just how beautiful the land is that he has. And it was really encouraging because he used a lot of different analogies from the Bible and different stories from the Bible. And one of the things he told us when he was telling us about his process and about the vineyard and about the vines is he showed us some different ways that he puts the vines on the different wires and stuff that are used to help them grow. And he mentioned that sometimes the vine has to struggle so that it can produce better fruit. And my mom has encouraged me with that over the past week a lot as well, and reminded me of that as some different things have happened in my life that were discouraging. And she just reminded me of what he said. And I was like, wow, yeah, like that's not fun, but it's encouraging because it's true. Like sometimes, I mean, it talks about that all through John chapter 15, verse 4-6, I believe, but it talks about struggling, and it talks about the sense of like God pruning us so that we produce better fruit. So you might be in one of those seasons where you are being pruned and struggling a bit and feeling like, God, why is this happening? But I believe that God will use all of it to produce more and better fruit in our lives if we let him. So you might have to struggle a little bit until your dreams happen. It might be a harder season at this current moment, but it won't be that way forever. And if you keep being obedient, keep trusting God, and keep pressing into what he has for you, he will produce the right things in your life and will use your life to glorify him if you let him. So I hope that encourages you. I hope that this episode has been helpful. I hope that you guys will keep listening to the podcast, keep tuning in, keep leaving reviews, keep sharing the podcast on your social media platforms so that others can discover it and be encouraged by it. But thank you guys again so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. It's been incredible to see the thousands that have already tuned in, and just seeing those numbers are always just super encouraging, because when you launch something new, you have no idea if 5 people are going to listen to it or more. And so seeing that there's over 1,000 of you listening to the podcast is really incredible and just really encouraging. So thank you guys so much for who you are and just for trusting me to be a voice in your life. I don't take that lightly, and I hope that you'll keep tuning in. And next week we have a really great guest, so stay tuned for next week's episode. Thanks, guys.